I am honored to be able to introduce Britton Shurley and Amelia Martens today, and I'm just so proud to be able to call them two of my colleagues in the English department. We're really lucky to have two really talented artists and teachers on our campus. Of course, we have lots of talented faculty, but these two really stand out. And I want to say that I think creative writing has really experienced a rebirth since they came to this campus and have been working as mentors and role models with our students. I think that we really owe them a lot of gratitude for that, and Britton will be sponsoring our literary magazine that will come out when? Hopefully in the spring. That's really exciting. We haven't had that in a long time, and so it's wonderful to be able to say that we have that again, and we owe a lot of that to their presence here. We're here today to enjoy their work and share their talents, but we're also here to honor them because you've probably heard about their recent big career achievement. Both of them were chosen as recipients of the Emerging Artist Award, which is given by the Kentucky Arts Council every year. There were 10 different artists chosen this year, and they were the only 2 poets in the state of Kentucky chosen for this really prestigious award, so that's huge. So part of it is just to enjoy their writing, and part of us being here is to have a reception in their honor, so I do ask you to stick around afterwards and congratulate them and have a cookie with us, and that'd be great. It's just with great pride that I introduce Britton Shurley and Amelia Martens today, and I think you'll enjoy it very much. Thank you.
I was also hoping for the podium that was solid. I've got 10 poems today, and the first couple I'm going to read are pretty brand new. Some of them are last week brand new. So we'll see how they go. I've been reading them in my head, and they sounded really good. And then we get into a couple, I've got a couple prose poems that'll come at the end, and they're from my chapbook that's going to be published in January of 2012, which is the future. So I've got a chapbook that's coming out, and it's called Purgatory. So they're a little uncomfortable. They're slightly uncomfortable poems, but they're really fun to read, and they look like little blocks, so you're only uncomfortable for about this much space. But those are coming. So we'll start. I think you'll see that what I choose to write about is pretty wide. The range of topics, it's little snippets of things that come from the radio. I think NPR is a great source. If you've got like 5 minutes, it'll make you smarter and just give you these little phrases that work really well for poetry. They also come from things that my students say, so be careful, you guys. I'm listening to you. This first poem was an NPR phrase, and the phrase was there was a story about how safe people are feeling these days, or how unsafe they're feeling. And the phrase that stuck with me was the theater of safety. And I was thinking, well, there's the theater of the absurd, there's the theater of all these things. What is the theater of safety like? So this poem is called If You Want to Kill Me. If you want to kill me on an airplane, on my way to the lavatory, or just before landing, there is very little I can do to stop you, except for the sunlight, which might come barreling through the porthole window, all white hot, and temporarily blind you as we bank left in preparation for our final approach. Or maybe you've misjudged the fuse length and taken a shortcut in your ball-making class, and all that explodes are your own unmentionables. If you want to kill me in my kitchen, on my way to empty the dishwasher or just the fridge, there is very little I can do to stop you, except not hand you a knife. And if you have one, ask you to please drop it on the linoleum and kick it gently over to me. Although if you get a puncture wound, by doing so, it likely won't be covered in my homeowner's insurance, and you would be open to sue. Or maybe I could offer you some unmarked foil packet. It could be green beans, or almost corned beef. And maybe this takes care of things because you are hungry and taken in by shiny things like tinfoil and melting ice crystals. If you want to kill me, I will be asleep soon after watching TV, a news report about fear and the theater of safety. So that was the long poem. The rest of them were very, very short. This one's called Occupation. Today we have come together to pull the wings off helicopters, as if they were not armed with rocket launchers, as if instead they had the segmented bodies of dragonflies, as if we were more than mechanics who wear coveralls and carry bolt cutters, as if there was some magic left somewhere and we might be the ones to find it. As if any of those parts could be remade, melted down, separated from their memories. As if we are at life and not at war. Then, for some reason, I've gotten into writing poems about my parents lately. I know, I thought that being pregnant, I would start writing more poems about babies, but I've actually started just writing more poems about parents. So maybe I'm focusing more on the parent side. So I've got two poems that are actually both about my dad. The first one is it's called Just North of Emma Wood, which I don't think you would have any idea what that means. Emma Wood's a state park that's just north of Ventura, and it's like camping like right on the beach. So this is like, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful campground. But it also has tide pools. So this is where we are. Just north of Emma Wood. My father was a sea monster, blind in the water, and so we clung to his back as barnacle daughters. He took us to the tide pools, tiny islands of rock with green seaweed tops, encircled by the left-behind salt water. We poked anemones in timid push-button motions until they waved their petals and shut their mouths around our fingers. He drew a house for each of us at the edge of the sand cliff and built dribble castles in the temporary valley below. My father was a sea monster in the sunset, his eyes Pacific, and we clung to him, tasting oceans when the land locked his body for months in the Midwest. This one, my dad used to do like these very interesting things, and one of them was because he only had daughters. I think he wanted to make sure that we were going to be tough people, and so he did a series of things in my imagination to make us into stronger people. And one of them was to hold a pillow and make you attack it. And yeah, because I think he wanted to make sure that we would never be kidnapped, or we would always be tough girls. And I also think that he just liked that we got to hit something because my mom didn't let us hit anything. So this is another poem about my dad. Teaching his daughters. 1. My father holds the pillow lengthwise, says, kick, punch, kick, punch. And we take turns, flying like wild chickens, our feathery girl arms and skinny legs thrown out from our bodies in this imaginary game of protect yourself. 2. My father says in Greece, they beat your feet and slaps our feet, dangling off the edges of our beds, which, like the 3 bears, line up 3 across. 6 feet, just larger than his hands, shine red in preparation. We might be tortured. 3. My father, in one swift motion, takes a key and holds it underneath each our jaws. The nerve pinches slightly against the bone. The skin imprints with the notched outline. As if it were a knife, he says, "Hold it tight." Okay. This last one of the new ones is, it's actually from September, which you'll see. But every year on September 11th, I feel like it's a poem day. Like something should be written. And I'm not sure why. Maybe it's just like that's how I'm marking time. But every year I feel like I remember the day, so the poem should be written. Except this year, I woke up late and I missed, like, you know, you have in your mind, this is where I was, this is what was happening, here's the time period. And I woke up late and I missed it. So all day I felt like I had missed thinking about things at the right moment in the day. So I got this poem was just in my mind when I came back to focus. September 11th, 2010. The sound of sirens, like a layer of dust covering the inside of my ear, my mind, my memory all day will take 2 or 3 steps down a dirt path and realize the path is asphalt, cement, a Manhattan sidewalk, revamped as a gritty landscape of paper birds and flames. 9 years later, I wake up feeling like I missed an earthquake, pre-scheduled to take place earlier this morning. The annual fingering of our scar. See the black smoke, thread the air pulled that brought buildings down. See images in amateur video footage. See faces squared in their ash masks. See sunlight sifting the living out. See people holding hands on the ledges of skyscrapers. See the end of a world as they leapt into the terrible blue. And that's that. Okay. Now I feel like you're ready for purgatory. So I've got a couple of these. They just are. They're little like paragraphs. Yeah, and they just it's just enough to make you uncomfortable. It's like having the bad cookie, and you're like, well, I'm going to eat the rest of it because it's in my mouth, but I'm uncomfortable. And they have no titles, which is also, I don't know why, but they have no titles. And they're all in the second person. So you are uncomfortable because you are doing these things, which I think is helpful. Here's the first one. And this is the one that starts the collection. You are under the Arctic Circle in a one-man submarine. Your nose itches, but there is no way for your hand to reach your face. You are wearing red wool long underwear, made by a woman named Elsie, who lives outside of Portland on the corner in a small yellow house next to the church. She knits these union suits during the months that end in Y. Elsie's husband was a lumberjack until the fire of '05, and she makes every suit his size. Her hands move together like dancers, practiced in the art of sharing space. This intimacy is exactly opposite of the compression you feel inside this metal tube as Elsie's loops tighten around you. Got a couple more of these. This one, the first part of this makes me really uncomfortable. There are 6 days until Christmas. Your car keys are made of construction paper, and you can see the glitter glue used to connect them to your keyring as they swing from your ignition. You are standing in the mall parking lot. Your car is on and locked. When the first reindeer falls, you turn just in time to see the antlers crack as the head splits open against the icy asphalt. 260 pounds of meat, a faint heartbeat pumps blood out across the white lane lines towards the shopping carts, corralled for safety. When the second one falls, you are lying on your belly underneath your car. You suck exhaust so deeply in, you think the blank eyes staring from the passenger side look just like dice. This is, and I think we probably all felt this way. This is my Purgatory Ice Storm poem. Yes, because that lent itself directly to this feeling. You wake up to the sound of the cradle rocking, of tree limbs falling, the crack and clatter, the creak and glass crash. Down will come baby. All begins with a groan, as if the tree were molting, as if suddenly the need to discard, to divest, to drop an arm occurred, and the joint let loose at the shoulder. The worst ice since '37, when barns were all that collapsed. Now power lines tense under the hanging weight and split their seams. Wires come unbundled and dangle into icicles on both sides of the street. You get out of bed. Your house is 48 degrees and falling. In the dark, electric blue flashes slash the sky. Transformers exploding on all sides. Everything you need is out of batteries. You think of picking up a kitchen knife. You put your face to the window, knowing, even though an inch of ice covers all the cars, the chain link fences, the mailboxes, this is exactly how the zombie movie starts. Okay, I've got two more. This is a short one. On each bridge out of the city, a body is picked over by scavengers. Pockets are emptied, buttons broken, as skin is exposed to fingerprints, which will be snipped away later in the day by birds who sharpen their beaks as they drag the concrete. You wait for the roof to fail too, and still it rains. And this is my last one. This one also ends my chapbook, so I thought it was a nice sandwich at the end. There are almost 7 billion people in closets lining the hallway. Like off-ramps, doors keep opening onto their lives. You are wearing blue 3D glasses. You have to make it down the hall before time expires. But the clock workers have gone berserk and tossed the long hand into the fire. Peter Gabriel is covering The Boy in the Bubble over the loudspeaker. All around you, knobs are turning and doors are creaking open like casket lids. You are wearing snowshoes, and the carpet has just turned into an ocean underneath your feet. Someone sets a paper boat afloat from their doorway. It carries a note. Thank you.
She's a tough act to follow, so please don't hold it against me. All right, I'm going to read kind of a snippet of the past few years, really. This first poem is called An Attempt at Self-Hypnosis, and it's really a writer's block poem. The idea of not being able to write and just staring out the window and letting the poem kind of take over. An attempt at self-hypnosis. Forget the neighbor's giant oak. Forget its cobweb of roots in the soil. Forget its leaves like weathered maps. Forget that old bald tire strung like a noose from its branches. Forget the rusted out car beside it. You should stare at the scars on your knuckles, at your nails gnawed down to the quick. You should note your measured breath, the way it slowly enters the body, the way it slowly passes away. You are a bag of ragged wind, a porch chime's hollow flute. You are that song unborn in the breeze. Do you think this will be enough? This next one needs a little bit of explaining. The title is 11 Steps to Becoming a Poet of the Tang Dynasty. you probably need a little bit of history to go with that. The Tang Dynasty was in China in the 8th and 9th century, and it was a really prolific period of poetry. The poets wrote a lot about drinking wine with each other, friendship, nature, things like that. And there's a couple poets, there's Li Po and Li Ho, and they kind of come in and out of this poem. Li Po supposedly drowned as he waded into the river and tried to embrace the moonlight. And Li Ho supposedly just wandered around the woods with a donkey and a bag, and he would write down scraps of poems and throw them in the bag and then compose poetry when he got home at night. So this is my take on how one would become a poet of the Tang Dynasty in the 21st century. 11 steps to becoming a poet of the Tang Dynasty. Scrawl your frail black bones of poems on the backs of junk mail envelopes. Use only pens you have stolen from banks. Let the lines of old poets hum like late night traffic through your head. Write letters to your long dead friends and dream of bright pink azaleas. Walk for miles with gravel in your shoes. Every year, dig a hole in the yard, then bury some small thing you love. At least once, you must fall to the ground in a rainstorm after midnight. You must crawl toward a puddle's white surface. You must drink the moonlight down. I'm kind of a masochist when I'm writing, and I give myself weird projects. If you actually look at the poem, it's in couplets, and each couplet's a haiku, which is 17 syllables. So no one ever notices that. So this was my chance to tell you that I did it. So there's that. It's also in 14 lines, which makes it a sonnet. So this is a poem to kind of fight off winter. Among the tastes to recall this winter, we had golden Belgian ale and plates of fresh tomatoes. Tomatoes sliced into thick orange moons. Tomatoes covered in greens from the garden. Chopped handfuls of spinach, of basil, of deer tongue lettuce. There was red wine vinegar, olive oil, and chunks of crumbled feta. We had sea salt, black pepper, and 7 small raspberries picked from our yard at dusk. They were sweet and slightly warm. This next poem comes, you'll see in the first little bit, it says Indiana, but Amelia and I lived in Indiana for a little bit when we were in grad school, and we came out of the backyard one night, and there was this cat that had mauled this rabbit, and that's where this poem came from. Memory of walking out the back screen door into the bruised blue light of an Indiana dusk, of the stray black cat that fled, and of the rabbit that leapt from the yews. How its leg hung so limply from the socket, how it swung as such useless weight, how each time you stepped a bit closer, the rabbit battered itself to the ground. All you could do was watch as its broken body sputtered toward the garden and then lay in a heap by the tulips, its ribs heaving up and down, its leg bent awkward beneath it, its eyes still darting wildly. This next poem comes from Indiana also. It's the oldest one in the packet. And it just so happened that while we were in grad school, it worked out for about 2 years that every time at lunch we had a break and could come home. We lived about a mile from campus, so we would walk home just at the time when The Price is Right was on. So I got really good at The Price is Right. And so this is what comes from being broke in grad school and eating too much ramen noodles and watching The Price is Right and reading Franz Kafka. In the dream where you're Kafka on The Price is Right, you dream you have come since childhood. First, your hand held tight in the pin-pricked palm of a grandmother who speaks only of mending socks. Later, you return on your own, the price of coffee inked on your forearm, and the name of your high school sweetheart tattooed across your wrist. You always wear the same plaid trousers, the same white t-shirt, reading Prague is in love with Bob. Every year, the same names, Suzanne, William, Enrique Sanchez Jr. Every year, someone else is supplied for life, with Bengay, cold and sinus tablets, a silver four-door hatchback with power locks and windows. From your seat in the back of the studio, you've begun to question God. You'd like a list of written reasons why some find their way to the stage and why others are merely applause. In these years without answer, you feel you've grown old. Your lower back now aching, your feet more unsteady, your heart so weak it could burst at the sound of your name. I also have a friend who made it onto The Price is Right, and she made it up contestants row, but never got to go up and do the showcase. Consequently, she also appears on the show Cash Cab, and I don't know how one person gets on 2 game shows. It's kind of lucky. This next poem is called Poem in a Time of War. We gather what we need from the cupboard, the bags of flour and sugar, the salt, the cinnamon, the cups and spoons for measuring. I pull the milk and butter from the fridge, and in a large glass bowl, she stirs these things in by hand. I fold the blueberries in with a spoon. What could I tell you of war? All I know is we're here together in a world we find hard to fathom, trying not to rush the days. In this house with a warming oven that will soon smell faintly of cinnamon, whose counters will fill with muffins, their tops inked blue by sweet juice. This one's called Fugue with Bees in the Bee Balm. And a fugue is a piece of music. Norm, correct me if I'm wrong, sir. It has a repeating theme that goes on with it. So I'm kind of just playing with sound and repeating those sounds throughout this piece. Fugue with the bees in the bee balm. The bees have been busy all June. Yes, the bees have been busy buzzing through the bee balm, busy nuzzling just like lovers through the pink and purple petals of the bee balm's bright summer blossoms. They have wallowed in pollen all June. With the fuzz of their fattened chest, they have scrubbed and have rubbed until drunk. Just look at those bees in the bee balm, how they're dizzy and drunk with such wonder, how they flit and they buzz through this world of such bounty and blossom. In this world without end, they are dragging the river's bottom, dredging steel through silt and mud, trying to loose that last boy's body from some snag of sunken branches. The body's gas, they say, should be building. Its cold blue skin should stretch and float those waterlogged lungs with ease. If the body doesn't surface by dusk, they know it could burst by morning. They have done this all before, and a river seldom keeps what it takes. That kind of came from NPR also. I heard this story about when bodies get drowned, their bodies fill with gas, and it will explode eventually. That's what most of the time they float to the surface because the gas will bring you up. But if you're caught down there, you don't float. This is the newest poem in the packet I'm reading. It's called The Thing About Death. Walking in the northwest woods, through that cool, dense green of pine, of spruce, of birch, my friend says his father is dying, that he's no longer sick with cancer, that it's wrecked its way through the stomach and begun to clamp down on the lungs. He tells me his father's at home, in a bed in Oklahoma, a morphine drip in his arm, at peace with the peace they can give him. On good days, his father tells stories, talks baseball, and even wants to watch movies. He loves that one about the father who knows he's dying of cancer and builds himself a house with a son who'd grown estranged. I have no idea how this feels, to watch as a body grows weaker, as those last shallow breaths escape, and that body is finally emptied, somehow lighter than moments before. When I think of how this must feel, I see a man wearing boots in my chest. He grinds his boot heel down into my tender-fisted heart. All I can say is I'm sorry. But he says the thing about death is that life goes on, which sounds like a line from Lao Tzu. Some truth this echo world might mirror, some proof to be found in these woods, where the brown of last year's leaves is always underfoot, and every fallen branch has its thick gray beard of moss. There are even bright brambles of blackberries, straining through scraps of light and bursting with bright white blossoms. In weeks, if we both returned, we could walk this trail together. We could pick till our hands were purple. We could eat until we were filled. This is my lone California poem in the packet. The poet's favorite photo. That one from a past December, looking down at 4 pale, bare feet, his and his wife's in the cold, dark Pacific. What he loves is how their 2 bodies blur, almost indistinguishable. Their 4 denim pant legs rolled to the calf, her light blue t-shirt and his thrift store polyester, somehow the same white hue. He loves how these 2 could be one body, connected somewhere outside the frame. Perhaps their shoulders touching or his left arm hinged around her waist. He loves this shot in which the world looks different. Those pinprick glints of light like stars on water's surface, the salt foam like a cloud's white gauze, and these 2 looking down in awe, somehow above it. This is the last poem. It's called When Our Children One Day Ask of Past Lives. And I actually wrote this poem before we knew we were having a kid. It has an epigraph from the Isa Upanishad, and it's a Hindu scripture from about 400 to 800 BC is when they finally got him down in Sanskrit. And that says, "Who sees all beings in his own self, and his own self in all beings loses all fear." When our children one day ask of past lives, we will tell them we were carrots that were wrenched from heavy clay. We were songbirds in the spires of a city, the crows that scavenged at dusk. We were 1,000 black-eyed Susans in a field of black-eyed Susans. We were flies eating in a pasture, wood that was piled for the pyre. We were bullfrogs and cicadas and then acres of wild alfalfa. We were fish in the warm Atlantic. Even now, we are wasps and clover. We are that thin line of dirt that you pick from beneath your nails. That's it.